Any orders that could give rise to punitive sanctions, if you're going to punish the person, they need to know what the rule is. They have to have notice. It's a due process problem. Other candidates and their supporters will be free to characterize and attack Trump. That's right. If Trump is wrong, Biden can come out and say that. The DOJ can come out and say that. Just come make a statement. They do all the time. Jack's office argues that Trump's criticisms of the search of his private residence, he says, they invite threats of harassment against law enforcement. But he's got no evidence of any actual threats that have ever emerged from any of the commentary at all. 24 states, and probably counting, are now joining Trump to fight Jack Smith's attempt to gag him. Jack doesn't want him to talk about the deadly force raid that they authorized at Mar-a-Lago, where they took pictures of Melania's bedroom and Barron's too. And now that Trump is talking about it, they're trying to cover it up. They're trying to silence him, because the more Trump talks about it, the more the American people realize how disgusting our justice system has become, and Trump's poll numbers go up. So they've got to shut him down. Now, this is from 24 states. Is your state on this list? We got a big list coming up. We got Iowa's here, Florida, West Virginia. What's up to Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, Idaho, Indiana in the house, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska. We got North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming, all joining forces to oppose Jack Smith's unlawful gag of Trump. Now, this is a brief. We're still waiting for Judge Cannon to grant permission for this to be accepted, but this is knocking at her door. So, Judge Cannon, this is what we're about to file with you. But here is what the states say. All right, listen, Judge Cannon, we got an important thing we got to talk about here. Free and fair elections in the United States depend on a candidate's ability to, actually speak. Attempts to stop them from speaking are harming more than just the candidate. Us. They hurt the voters. We're denied access to crucial information. And when agents of one candidate, like Joe Biden, when they seek a court order to muzzle on other candidates, that raises fundamental questions under the First Amendment. All these states are here, and we stand together, and we stand four square behind the protections of the First Amendment and the Constitutions. Each branch of the government, even the judiciary, should be cautious about abridging core political speech, especially core political speech in an election. Now, unfortunately, Jack Smith is not doing that. They say free speech is at its strongest when it protects fundamental and political speech. But Jack Smith here, who's working on behalf of the United States, yeah, right, he's not even lawfully appointed. Judge Cannon's also dealing with that one, working on behalf of Joe Biden, asked this court to curtail that right by ordering Trump gagged. Now, such an order is presumptively unconstitutional. And Your Honor, if you granted this request would prevent Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee, from speaking out at all about this prosecution and the criminal process that's trying to take away his liberty right now. That prosecution, of course, is led by Joe Biden. Now, as administrators of free and fair elections, we, the states, have an interest in ensuring that no illegal prior restraint is entered against any major political candidate. Why? Our citizens have an interest in hearing from President Trump. And accordingly, we file this on support of President Trump and against Jack Smith. President Donald Trump is the presumptive Republican nominee here. Now, he's being prosecuted by Joe Biden, but attempting to take away his liberty is seemingly not enough. Yes, they're trying to imprison him, but it's much more. They now seek to silence him from even criticizing the prosecution. This is unprecedented. It's an assault on Trump's First Amendment rights, and it's on the American people's essential reciprocal right to hear what Trump has to say on the most heated political issues of the day. Now, although Trump is currently a defendant in this case, that doesn't mean that he's justified in having prior restraints. Courts no doubt must ensure that they take steps, sure, to protect their processes, but criticisms of the investigation or criticisms of the prosecution is not enough to trigger those steps. Now, for several reasons, Jack is wrong. One, the federal government's request for a prior restraint is vague. It's overbroad. These statements, they say, pose a significant and imminent and foreseeable danger, but it doesn't explain how. Judging from what they deem to be threats in their motion, it's fair to infer that the covered statements could include any criticism of their team, which would include core political speech as well. And second, the federal government cannot meet the heavy burden that's required for a prior restraint. If you're going to restrict speech about a judicial proceeding, you got to have a clear and present danger, okay? Clear. Jack cannot make that showing. There haven't been any. There have been no comments that have threatened law enforcement or resulted in any threats to law enforcement. And third, the presidential campaign is in full swing right now. As Americans turn their attention to the upcoming election, courts should take special care to ensure that voters can actually judge the candidates on their own merits. And so a prior restraint might limit a candidate's ability to campaign and to meet those standards. And so the proposed order here would not meet those standards. And so Judge canon, you should deny it. The states continue. 24 states, they say, look, Your Honor, this prior restraint is vague and overbroad. Similar to what we saw in Trump's filing, the federal government also asks Trump to be gagged from making statements. But what are those statements? They don't explain. That's enough. You don't even need to go further, Your Honor. Any orders that could give rise to punitive sanctions, if you're going to punish the person, they need to know what the rule is. They have to have notice. It's a due process problem. But the special prosecutor proposed order fails that test. They don't even explain what they would be mad about. Trump would be left to guess how third parties might respond to even the most innocuous statement. So Trump says something, then Steve Bannon makes a post, and now Trump is responsible for that? He would likely be compelled to steer far clear of anything. So he would just say nothing. Otherwise, they'll prosecute him and throw him in jail. Now, reading between the lines, the federal government's request is way too broad. Jack Smith identifies no comments by Trump that actually pose a real danger, and it is not even alleged that he called for violence. Didn't even say that. Rather, Jack Smith points to general criticisms that Trump has made about the raid. Jack says that any comment that Trump may make might pose a significant, imminent, and foreseeable danger. Now, the reasoning from Jack just simply does not pass constitutional muster. Criminal defendants have a greater constitutional claim than other trial participants to speak out against their prosecution. That's their mechanism of defense. And Trump's comments about the seizure of evidence from his private residence that led to his indictment is exactly that. Indeed, one of the most important public debates during this process has been the role of the justice system and the weaponization of it to target Trump's political opponents. Look at all these articles. Now, to the extent that the government is actually concerned with real threats, this would go way far beyond that, beyond the narrow circumstances that speech will give rise to genuine danger. So, Your Honor, if you grant the request, you would place the thumb on the political scale and turn standard protections for criminal defendants on their heads. Other candidates and their supporters will be free to characterize and attack Trump. That's right. If Trump is wrong, Biden can come out and say that. The DOJ can come out and say that. Just come make a statement. They do all the time. They leak crap to the Washington Post, to CNN, whatever. Just tell your little acolytes on CNN and everywhere else to do your talking points, go in your group chat. Yes, I know. Send it out to everybody. They all just repeat each other like copy and paste morons anyways. So it's fine. They're free, but they know they're not effective. And they're like, yeah, we kind of did want him dead. So we don't really have a good defense to this. So how about we just gag him? Trump, however, would not be able to directly respond without fear of incurring some sort of a sanction for violating this gag order. Silencing one side on behalf of a political debate would turn the First Amendment on its head. And Jack Smith also doesn't even meet the burden that's required. Given the serious disfavor towards restrictive orders, the party seeking one pending a criminal trial bears the burden. And when the record lacks any evidence, there shouldn't be one granted. In holding the already narrow restraint in a prior case, the Supreme Court gave us three factors. What determines whether a prior restraint is justified? Here is whether a prior restraint is justified. Whether the publicity would impair the defendant's right to a trial. So read that as Trump's right. Whether measures short of an order of restraint might have impaired a fair trial, and whether the restraint would be effective in ensuring a fair trial. So it's the defense rights, not the government's right. The court could not determine there that the restraining order actually entered would even serve its purpose. And so the court concluded that the guarantees of freedom of expression are not an absolute prohibition, but they still have a heavy burden. Same thing, Sixth Circuit came out. They employed the clear and present danger test. Was there going to be a clear and present danger? The Sixth Circuit recognized that separation of powers, a unique feature of our constitutional system, would be undermined if the judicial branch tried to control political communication between a congressman and his constituents. Exactly right. A politician's role includes communicating with the electorate. That's us. And that's the point. They don't want Trump talking to us because if he does, we know the truth and then they lose. So here, Jack Smith argues that Trump's mischaracterization of facts surrounding the seizure of evidence has endangered law enforcement officers. Who? And threatened the integrity of the proceedings. How? But that reasoning does not justify curtailing his speech. First, Jack Smith has not shown that the comments are a mischaracterization of anything. Indeed, there were months of disputes between DOJ prosecutors and FBI agents over how to get the documents back. Trump is justified in questioning the decision to engage in this raid. These were the same questions senior FBI officials were raising as well. And Trump is justified in highlighting that the raid invoked the FBI's use of force policy rather than taking an approach that would not have needed that authorization. Remember, the FBI had already been there. They had already come in and sat at a conference table. Donald Trump popped in. You guys want some lemonade? It's a great day. You know, whatever. In arguing otherwise, Jack's prosecutors, they resort to unsupported insinuations. Trump has never said, for instance, that federal law enforcement agents were complicit in a plot to assassinate him. No, didn't say that. Likewise, the special prosecutor says that an armed attack was carried out by one of Trump's supporters after the post. In implying without any evidence at all that President Trump is to blame for the actions of a man who is already known to the FBI. So the guy who attacked the FBI building, account-bearing Ohio FBI standoffs, they blame Trump for that. The FBI already knew who this guy was. He alleges that President Trump's perspective on the raid has already endangered law enforcement officers. So if they're already in danger, what happened? Can you give us a single example of one? No, you can't. In any event, precluding President Trump from discussing the terms of the authorized raid, if he can't do it, that's improper. And his ability to question the federal government and their motive is why they're trying to take away his liberty. Nothing in the record shows that Trump made any intentionally false or inflammatory statements, and it's essential that he be allowed to voice his opinion. And second, President Trump's speech did not endanger law enforcement officials at all. Jack's office argues that Trump's criticisms of the search of his private residence, he says, they invite threats of harassment against law enforcement. But he's got no evidence of any actual threats that have ever emerged from any of the commentary at all. It's not even clear how such threats could arise, given that the identities of the people involved in the raid are largely not even public. Hypothetical and conjectural threats, that is, worries, are not enough to show an obstruction of the justice process worthy of encroaching on Trump's core political speech. And third, nothing Trump has said can be construed as a direct threat at all. Although Trump will sometimes use colorful rhetoric, it's true, to communicate his intent to fight hard for Americans, he's never threatened law enforcement officials in this case, nor has invited others to do so at all. Without evidence of definite obstructions of justice, any prior restraint, like the one proposed by Jack, would encroach on the public's interest in learning what's happening in these cases. And fourth, Your Honor, 24 states, including the state of Texas, sent out to Judge Cannon, they say, fourth, though the government repeatedly invokes the integrity of the proceedings, it never explains with any specificity how Trump might endanger it at all. For example, Jack Smith never offers proof that the court will be unable to, sit a fair jury for that. Though he speaks in generalities about messages to potential jurors, we already have tools for that. We got voir dire and other tools that can ferret out jury problems. Nor does Jack Smith allege, or let alone prove, that any comments will sway witnesses or otherwise color the evidence at all. Merely invoking this platitude cannot be enough to justify a severe restraint on Trump's First Amendment rights. No evidence at all shows that the restraining order would actually complete and serve a purpose. And also, Your Honor, this is election interference. Interference with an ongoing presidential election weighs against a prior restraint. You can't gag him. If granted, Jack's request will stop Trump from discussing a major campaign issue during this election year. And like any other criminal defendant, Mr. Trump has a constitutional right to speak. And his millions of supporters, as well as millions of detractors, also have a right to hear what he has to say. Indeed, the citizens of our 24 states have a right to hear from presidential candidates on these important issues, including when one of those issues is an ongoing prosecution against that candidate. Now, issuing a prior restraint against President Trump here would set an unsettling precedent for future political candidates. Political opponents and opportunistic litigators may seek to stymie debate by relying on whatever order is issued here. Such an outcome would be an unwelcome burden on our process. Everyone's going to be gagging everyone, even more so when it comes to the highest stakes election of our time. Now, elections are a prime opportunity, Your Honor, for elected officials to hear from their constituents. Depriving us of that is a problem, and gagging a candidate means that we cannot learn how he thinks about these issues, and the Constitution is designed against that. To be sure, there are times when a gag order, even of a political candidate, may be justified, but this court need not find the distant boundary of when that might occur because it's not happening here. All Americans are entitled to have their free speech rights respected. The presidential election is a key component of our democratic republic, one implicating a uniquely important national interest. A prior restraint on one of the major party candidates for president will impede Americans' ability to communicate and to receive communications from an entire campaign and a person who might lead the entire branch of the federal government. Trump is being gagged from discussing matters of importance to his constituents, that's us, and they are being prohibited from learning from these conversations about how Trump proposes to lead. But in the end, a government may not censor what the people hear as they undertake to decide for themselves which candidate is most likely to be an exemplary officer. Deciding the relevance of a candidate's speech is the right of the voter, not of the government. And so, Your Honor, on behalf of the 24 states, this court should deny Jack's request to modify Trump and his conditions and gag him. Signed by 24 states, all listed here: Iowa, Florida, and many of the others, additional counsel, attorney generals from all the states. 24 states all joining in. Hopefully Judge Cannon grants this, accepts this filing from our 24 friends here, and acknowledges that this gag order is unconstitutional. It doesn't serve the interest of the American people. It's antithetical to our justice system. The whole point of the First Amendment is to petition your government for a redress of grievances grievances. One of those redresses, or one of those grievances, is about the justice system. It's about the weaponization, the politicization of the FBI, the DOJ against one candidate in this country. So hopefully, Cannon, make sure that this line of communication between Trump and us stays open. We're going to cover all of the rest of this Florida litigation, and we'd love it if you joined us as we did. Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. If you like this video, we've got a great segment coming up next on Joe Biden's dementia. Karine says it's all just deep fakes. So we'll go over there, and we'll see you there and back here on the next one.